Hey everyone, welcome back to the Metamodern Meaning podcast. Today I am joined by Layman Pascal and Dechen Ellen McSweeney, two folks that will be leading some really important conversations and engagements at the upcoming Metamodern Spirituality Lab that'll be happening at Sky Meadow. And this seemed like a cool opportunity just to give a short little a set of expositions and ideas and engagements so that we're excited about for this event and share some of that with you. And if you're potentially on the fence about coming, getting a sense of the crazy people that are going to be involved in this sort of thing. So thank you both for coming on and having a quick chat about all this and exploring the topic of metamodern love and what we'll be getting up to at this upcoming lab. So why don't we maybe start with you, Layman, and if you want to set a little context for what this event is and give people a sense of it and talk about the theme, and then I'd love to hear Dachen's views about all this too.
Sure. This is it's an event whose sort of seed was in the last version of Metamodern Spirituality Lab, and I think having that field iterate itself and unfold itself and sort of whisper its next phase to us is something we've been trying to do in Vermont. And there's a sense about both uh, how we hold the capacity to love as a human function and as a spiritualizing function and how we relate to these broader philosophical concepts of Eros and agape and philia and cosmic and evolutionary love and all those sorts of things, and how we hold that in a way that is more congruent with a metamodern lens, let's say, with sincere irony and coherent pluralism, and not just sort of naive affirmation that we know what the facts of the cosmos are and we know what the nature of love is. So we want to hold it correctly, but in our ongoing journey of what we've been doing in Vermont, which is taking this sort of meta modern community lens and doing a deep dive into different modules that are embedded in human spiritual history. This is obviously one of the big ones. Love is huge as a description of the fundamental nature of reality, as a normative orientation for human living and social construction, as a yogic instruction about how to be with yourself and be with the world and be with others and be with a master. And we also think to be with a field. So there's a lot of interesting elements where that constellate around love in terms of being a significant feature of classic spirituality. And how do we talk to ourselves and each other about that in a way that is legitimately meta modern or meta modern equivalent? So that's what I'm very excited about. We're going to be doing all the normal, awesome stuff we do out there, but I'm super excited that Dachen's going to be here to help us facilitate certain kinds of field work that I just saw her do really well at the Source Keepers Gathering.
Mm,
Cool. Yeah, would you say a little bit about that, Dachen? That sounds really awesome.
sure, yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that's coming to mind is that I have good friends, especially our good mutual friend Jeffrey, who's attended, I think, almost all, if not all, of these metamodern spirituality labs. And I myself was at one of the first ones years ago when I was still a
Mhm.
resident at the monastic academy. In fact, I was there the day before I received the name Dechen.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lore, like as someone who's kind of outside this temple that you, Brendan, and Layman have been cultivating, there's a metamodern spirituality lore that I'm very excited to kind of plunge myself into in terms of what I've always perceived from the outside as a combination of like really intense logos, like the potential for quite high level philosophical conversation and a kind of working things out together while also hanging out quite deeply and immersing in kind of both the beauty of the land at Sky Meadow, but also just the weirdness of coming together in what wants to be emergent ritual. So I just wanted to kind of say that I feel like such a blessed visitor to that temple, and I have a lot of respect for what it is. And as I've found myself coming closer to the door of that temple through Layman's invitation, what I find myself bringing is I've really been dedicated for the past several years to the potential that can unfold in intimate groups. I would say groups of three, four, six, eight, maybe up to 12 the kind of field work that can happen in groups of that size who come into deeper intimacy with each other over the course of years. That's really been kind of my behind the scenes, sometimes not behind the scenes, R&D work, so to speak, is just really being in friendship, and I would say particularly meta-modern friendship with a lot of our mutual friends. I feel like one way that I think about love just right now is it's the root system of what might make any fruiting body trustworthy, more stable, more nourished. And so I feel like I'm coming in with this history of just kind of nourishing, loving relationship as the basis of collaboration, as the basis of field production, as the basis of developmental kind of co-catalyzing each other. So yeah, that's something that feels important to say is that I've just been really dedicated to small group work. And what was so cool about the Source Keepers gathering where Layman and I were hanging out last week was it was like a family reunion. It was like 35 people, and to some degree, many of whom kind of, yeah, we were like, some of us were distant cousins, some of us are siblings, some of us are practically married. And I think there's something about the love that is deepening the ties of that community, what we could call the meta-modern community, just one little corner of it, that I think we really saw at that gathering. I think we saw the power of love and also the power of grief. Um, yeah, the grief that emerges from that love. So yeah, I think that's a little bit about kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. I'm really, yeah, a couple things come to mind, and I'm interested. Something that was coming up was, this is going to be a weekend event. There's the opportunity to come early and be part of this kind of pre-retreat thing. So kind of up to 5 days or so, but a relatively small time to maybe, especially if someone's coming new or doesn't, maybe they've only seen a couple of these people online or something like that. Right. That, maybe, the idea of like love and a lot of the stuff that building the kind of field that you're describing, that kind of work is sort of like, oh, that sounds really intense. And one of the questions for me is sort of like, how do we navigate sort of the potential for pushiness in our desire for connection, and particularly in an event that we're kind of foregrounding this idea of love. I find that this is something I've had to navigate in a lot of different spaces, often in spiritual contexts, where it's sort of like either you're going to be very remote and everyone's just going to do a ritual and you're all going to leave, or there's like someone coming up to you be like, share your soul with me, and it's like, dude, I just met you, man. And I'm curious about that because this has also been a really important vibe sensibility thing for me personally around when I can feel comfortable in like meta modern spaces where I can there seems to be a kind of relaxedness about a lot of this as well. That's not it yeah, it helps for me for some of those kinds of allergy responses. But I'm curious about both of your thoughts about that in a kind of short temporal container, how to go deep with people, how to make that feel organic and real and natural and not forced, and what the kind of right, I think boundaries is also a really important topic for any discussion like this. So I don't know. You could start, Dechen, and then we'll go to Layman on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, without boundaries, it's hard to have good love. So I really like what you're saying. Um, I mean, the thing the thing that comes to mind for me is that, you know, I trained a lot in the practice of circling, which to some degree is a practice that you can just kind of drop in. You can just kind of drop in with strangers, have a certain kind of exchange, and you might never see that person again. And yet maybe there's something that was taught, something that was received. So I think really important to kind of just like hold an open hand in terms of, I was thinking about Layman actually. I hadn't seen Layman in years before I came to Source Keepers, but it's like we become these little like touchstones for each other. It's like, oh yeah, I saw you 3 years ago and it was like this, and now I'm seeing you and it's kind of like this. So there's a spaciousness, or there's a way that what the quality of these even just little encounters are kind of reveals something about where we're at, where the field is at, what's happening in the world. So I think those little drop-in touchstones are super valuable and
Mm.
in a way don't need to come with any commitment, even though I think some of what Layman's pointing to with this gathering is actually looking at longer term commitment and more depth and what that affords. But I also think that the touchstones are really important too, just off the
Yeah,
cuff.
commitment and boundaries are a really interesting question. And one woman who's coming had reached out to me and suggested that it would be great for attendees to be asked to bring photos of people they love. And so I grabbed
Mm.
this one near my computer. That's my partner, Saya, there.
Mm.
But the notion of and I think one of the things I'm looking forward to is a kind of storytelling around how we've been with commitments in the field and the complexities that involves. But yeah, there's it's definitely easier for people who have a skill of dropping into sort of intersubjective work and people who've been in before and are returning. For people who are new, it can be a little bit difficult to gauge what the balances are. But I think we're trying to set up, in my mind, we're trying to set up a certain kind of stew. It has these sort of balances, right? It's going to be very intellectual. It's going to be very emotional. It's going to be very physical. It's going to be very social. It's going to be very spiritual. But that's not throwing on anybody all at once. You sort of opt into the degree of involvement that you want. And it's a very open space for taking the amount of time or having the side processing conversations that you need in order to handle that. We anticipate that people are going to go through waves of crises or those sort of things, not necessarily in the most dramatic fashion, but you might feel like you hate something that's going on or you're not sure about it. And then, yeah, go and talk to this person and go and talk to that person and we'll work it through. But we really do, I think, prioritize niche spaces and like a fluid social context whereby people can work through these things at their own speed. Um, Yeah, I think one of the things that makes the metamodern spaces, particularly the metamodern spirituality spaces, really engaging is this double tendency. It's related to the sincere irony question of like, we want to really be participatorily engaged in all the kinds of experimental sacred capacities that we think are appropriate to the human being, including love, including passion, including resonance, including attunement, including friendship. But also we maintain the not only the right, but the necessity to be complicated, critical, ironic, humorous individual thinkers in various ways, right? So the space for humor and the space to be objectors in various ways, that's really honored here. Right. I think you don't really have a metamodern space unless everybody is both saying yay and nay to everything all the time. So don't feel like you're on the outside because you have a nay to this. Everybody's got a nay to this. That's the field in which we're playing.
Nay and fields makes me think a lot about horses. I wish I had a connection to make beyond that, but um, any yeah, I mean, I can ask a few other guiding questions here, and also feel free to bring anything that's floating around for you up in terms of posing any inquiries. But yeah, I also I'm always attuned to people's sensitivities, particularly around this kind of a topic. In terms of the suggestiveness that they might be reading into things, right? Oh, Layman just said it's going to be super physical and people are going to be saying no and they're not okay with things. It's like, this is not any kind of weird sex cult thing. Of course, you always say, Layman, every time someone has to say that they're not a weird sex cult, they've already, kind of undermined themselves. But clearly, or hopefully what should be clear, this is a very safe container and there are not any kind of, in fact, if you're looking for a wild sex cult experience, please do not come to this. That's not the kind of experience that I, as a host here at Sky Meadow, want to be facilitating. But maybe we could just speak to some of that because it's a really interesting, it's a dangerous, but also very important for the human experience kind of element of the love question around human sexuality and how those things can get wrapped up or confused with each other. I don't know if either of you want to kind of tackle any of that.
Yeah, well, we probably both have something to say on this. I think the question of Eros and its role, both as a social orientation and as a spiritual orientation, and also as a philosophical description of how the universe is functioning, there people find real beauty and engagement with that, but it also can be a very misleading and overly suggestive term. I've written some articles on why Eros might not be a really good way to talk about this because you end up having to say, well, I don't just mean sex. And you're like, well, okay, but then why did you choose a word that's going to make everybody think about that? right? So there is this classical discussion around the emergent scintillation and mutual allurement of things, and there's a lot to be said for that argument. But it certainly can go in the wrong direction and evoke the wrong things in people, lead to the wrong anticipations. And it also tends to outshine all these other forms of love that we also want to explore: family love, domestic love, children, friendship, agape, right? All these things are equally important and equally fundamental.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm probably most of the listeners here will be aware that there's a not too far from Sky Meadow, a hub of the cosmoerotic humanists who make a strong push for the Eros argument, right? And there are some plausible things to the way they do it, and we have sort of congenial mutual relations with them. But also, a lot of people are undecided about what they think the value or danger of those arguments are. And we would like to be formulating and clarifying a way of holding all the forms of love, including Eros, in a way that's maybe a little bit cleaner. It certainly has a slightly different flavor than the one we see associated with people that are sort of pushing for an Eros description of reality.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean there's a few things coming up. I noticed that I'm often drawn in this space to personal storytelling. I appreciated when you mentioned that, Layman, that my engagement in the metamodern space hasn't been one so much of logos and kind of laying out concepts and philosophies, but more about kind of, in a sense, throwing myself into the arena, body, heart, and soul. And actually, I'm quite excited to do more of the kind of logoic work now. But I'm thinking about how in my own life experience, I'm someone through whom a lot of Eros can move, right? I'm an Enneagram 2. Enneagram 2s think that romantic love is the solution to everything. So there's been this kind of a lot of allurement, right? A lot of draw, more warm than cold, right? That kind of thing. That's just kind of been my life experience. And I would say that over time, I'm beginning to experience what Cynthia Bourgeault calls in her book Eye of the Heart. I was really moved by this kind of the transmutation of Eros into agape, or just the importance of that process. It's not that I never go into the Eros zone, I absolutely do over and over again, but there's some kind of stabilization or refinement of that powerful force of allurement that I find can kind of stabilize into what you might even call, bodhicitta, like a really wholesome spiritual motivation to really be of benefit. And I think those things are not separate at all. So that's not to kind of demonize the more kind of erotic and raw and kind of carnal expressions of Eros, but to say that it lies along a spectrum of affiliation, of connectedness, of collaboration, creativity. And it's just been interesting to observe that. I feel, at least for myself, that I moved through. I think there is a phase where we need to actually activate and claim and clear up the shame that kind of can be there in that, and just the connection to desire. A lot of us have a lot of work to do in terms of clearing the way so that we can actually experience our desires again. And then there's the process of kind of refining and stabilizing and learning how to wield that fire, learning how to kind of tame that dragon to the ends that we've um, yeah, to our highest aspirations, I
Mm.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. I mean, this is such an important topic, and I'm sure it'll be a lot of some of the stuff we get into. But I'm really glad that, we're deepening into this conversation, this element, because I feel like it is something that remains an important aspect to be further excavated and really explored from a very healthy, open, honest, and critical and caring kind of way. So I think that'll be certainly a part of it. But there's so much also that's going to be a part of a part of this event and a part of this sort of broader conversation. And I don't know. By all means, feel free to bring up anything that's alive for
Well, I
you.
have a question for you, Brendan, because Dechen mentioned the logoic aspect, right? And uh, I'm sure she's going to be holding a lot of the intersubjective field work, maybe around, heart make and transmutation. And I'll be holding a lot of the, let's say, yogic elements of it, and then some of the organizational elements. But I think you'll be holding a lot of the sort of philosophical big picture elements, right? And like there's a question from the point of view of metamodernism, coherent pluralism, integrative mentalities, whatever the new cultural and psychological framing is called. How does that view love as a fundamental component of reality and or a fundamental driver of the evolutionary process? And I think that you probably have a lot of curiosity and a lot of hunches around that.
Yeah, I do. And yeah, I mean, you know, people, I actually don't talk about this as much like in podcast settings, but certainly in personal conversations, it comes up quite a lot. My love for Dante. And I think if people really, I mean, I took like a year-long course at Yale Divinity School going deep into the Paradiso, well, actually all of Dante's works. And what I love about that, and why I keep mentioning, is because it picks up on the one hand this sort of kind of Catholic notion of the ordering of love and love being the driver. Obviously, it's a deeply Neoplatonic idea as well towards the divine and human relationships being the conduit of that sort of relationship to ultimate love. And it kind of presents, you could say, its own big picture of love being what, in Dante's words, moves the planets and the other spheres. Like it's this cohering force that is the divine, and God is love, Ho Theos Agape Estin, and thereon and all that. But it also comes not just with this sort of disembodied kind of abstract love of the divine. It's channeled through and made a revelation by the figure of Beatrice, who's Dante's human personal love. Now, all that's filtered through a kind of, chivalrous kind of interesting 14th century thing. But the point is that there's a beautiful way in which poetry and theology, and also like what we would probably think of today as meta theory, are all bound up together in this beautiful tapestry in a work like Dante's. And that kind of thing has been very influential for me. And so maybe a lot of people out in the space see me via the podcast and tend to associate me with more kind of geeky egghead sort of meta theorizing stuff. But for me, a lot of this is deeply spiritually and you could say emotionally rich with the resonances of a kind of apophatic mystical attraction in that deeper Neoplatonic Eros component to the love, capital L, and so that is a big part of my work, and I try to hold all those things together. I think this is a lovely kind of constellation of personalities right here on this call and in this event, because we are kind of holding certain aspects of this, but I also know that all of us hold different aspects of that within ourselves as well. So there's kind of a fractal component in which our different emphases might come out or get drawn out in different contexts. And maybe to tie that nicely together, I think that's something that friendship and love brings forth, right? It's like it's an emphasis of people's particular strong characteristics and capacities, and allows for the flourishing of people in sort of their best self and their optimal sort of self-expression in those particular modalities of coming together with your friends, with people that you love, is something that literally, well, literally figuratively draws that out of you. I mean, having interactions, conversations, engagements with people in this space makes me feel like I'm leveling up to a whole other way of manifesting as a person in the world, and brings online all sorts of a quickening of temperament and capacity. And that is so enlivening and enriching. And so appreciating that field of love that allows for that to come forth is also very beautiful. So I'm just going to throw all that out as an answer to that question.
I'm so glad Layman asked you that. Yeah, because I was in the same place. I was like, no, we need to turn the mic on you because you've been really co-stewarding, the creation of this kind of eclectic and evolving and unfolding, event that's been happening at a really steady rhythm for these years. And I too was appreciating thinking about the different kind of poles that each of us might hold, and also how we might rotate among them, that way in which I get to maybe I get to sit in more of a philosopher's seat, and we get to hear Brendan's, sacred music or poetry or works of art, which I've had the pleasure of seeing at Sky Meadow. So indeed, it's like everyone contains multitudes. We don't want to pigeonhole each other into any particular archetype. But I've been reflecting, I mean, this is really coming in at the ground floor, but I've just been reflecting on I haven't identified more with what we call metamodern spirituality. And, I think we can probably take a guess as to why. There's just certain, I don't know, certain modes of discourse that I haven't felt myself very at home in. That's kind of kept me on the outside. And yet, just in so many ways, I've been kind of living it. And so I love how there's an invitation here for people who've been kind of touching the space in different kinds of ways to really come in. And I think that kind of multimodal encounter between the soulful and the nerdy and the playful and the dark and the light, it's really, really fun and enlivening, as you say.
Yeah, the welcome in part is really interesting, right? There's certain kinds of capacities and attunements and coincidences that lead a person to be ready to come into this. There's also a certain apprehensiveness if they haven't been in this or they're not sure about how particular or how intellectual it is or all that sort of thing. But one of the real beautiful things about these kind of events, which distinguishes them a little bit from source keepers, where everybody's sort of known to each other and has had a lot of background in holding these kinds of things, is usually at the Metamodern Spirituality Labs, there's a couple of people who are wandering into this for the first time going, hey, I don't have anybody to talk to about this. I've been working on these things on my own. There's nobody in my town I can deal with. What are you guys doing? I'm vaguely attracted and I'm not sure why. Right. And that, like, the constant permeability to people that are encountering it for the first time, I think that keeps us sane and humble, but it also is one of the most exciting things because the field, if we want to use that terminology, the general field that we're working on is like a paradigmatic and a spiritual culture shift. It's not something that's proprietorial or branded or owned or like some group somewhere is doing the project. It's out there all over the place, effervescing and emerging. And a huge amount of the work we have to do is to meet and encounter and interconnect each other in order to bring this to life. And one of the things that came up to me a minute ago, before we finish this out, is I'm curious what we each would want to say to the people who are coming to this. Because, like, for me, I would kind of want to say, uh, take seriously the idea that it already exists, and like try to make some contact between the coherence in your heart right now and the already existing and coming into being sense of the real or metaphorical nature of the intersubjectivity we're going to hold. Like, reach out to it before you get here, feel into it, fall in love with it, and let that love bring you to the event rather than wait for the event to show it to you.
Mm. Yeah, what's coming to me just right off the top is something like I feel such a profound degree of appreciation and kinship, both with those who come who I may know, and also those who you just mentioned, laymen who might be kind of toiling in relative isolation. Um, I think I just want to say almost like thank you for following your nose and following the lure of your kind of excitement and curiosity and the resonance of your heart and sort of like we really want to nourish you and kind of send you home having encountered something that can kind of um, fuel and inspire and catalyze and enrich what you're already doing. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, what comes up for me is something like this twin pairing between wanting people to know that they will be profoundly cared for, and and that is taken as a kind of sacred responsibility. At least I'll speak for myself again as the one who kind of is the host here at Sky Meadow for that people's well-being and safety is paramount, and to feel that and to be confident in that. And this other thing of also it's an invitation to be challenged, right? So they're within bounds. This is a place to be part of a conversation that you're not tracking, but it hopefully, rather than feeling maybe threatened by that, you're like really interested because there's something going on there that you get a sense that, oh, that there's something there. And so to allow yourself to maybe sit with some of that discomfort, or if part of the ritual of going, moving across the land is arduous or something, that leaning into that and allowing yourself to be a little bit at your edge there, and to somehow know that both of those things are part of these events, I think is important. And so that is what I'd want to let people know. Well, this was great. I think hopefully this is just, it gives folks a sense of what this is going to be, and what these kinds of events are like, and get people a sense of the two folks who will be facilitating a lot of this. So yeah, thank you for doing this. I'm really looking forward to this, and every one of these events is always really beautiful and meaningful in some very similar but also different way, and I'm looking forward to that experience here. But really excited to see what this particular theme and this particular group of folks brings out, and the vibe that and the field that's generated from that. But thank you both. Any final thoughts, or we can call it there?
Well, I mean, I agree they're all unique in their own way, but I have a sense there's going to be something notably different or special about this one.
Hmm.
And I hope that we've given a sense of the felt flavor of what we're working with. And I'm twice as happy now as when I started this conversation, and I was already pretty happy when I started this conversation.
I love that. Yeah, what I would say is that if you think you might be any kind of weirdo or shaman, you should come and see Layman. You just should. I highly recommend that. Um, there's not too many people in the world who have been tracking this kind of work that's happening in the cracks. There's just not that many people in the world that have been tracking it in the way that Layman does, and I think it can just be a real gift to come and talk to you and kind of have one's existence, buoyed a little bit by that seeing. And the same is true for you, Brendan. I mean, you're just holding down with so much integrity and beauty this gorgeous space at Sky Meadow. Yeah, both of you have just been of such profound service to the community. So yeah, I feel like folks can trust your track record and your sincerity and your irony. Anyway, so yeah,
Well,
I just
yeah.
really admire both of you and super glad to be coming in. And Sky Meadow is so
Thank
nice. I
you.
want to start telling people about all the cute places, like the little, you know, pagodas and hidden gazebos and beautiful foliage. I mean, what could be better than
Yeah.
Vermont in October? Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And
You.
while we're all loving on each other in this way, I also want to, shine that spotlight on you too, Deitch, and the work that you've been doing, and that you discussed, and a lot of that people are going to learn and find out more about. I mean, it's holding that heart-centered community building, relationship deepening, part of this is so huge. And it's just, since meeting you, I've gotten that profound sense of deep soul, and I think that you bring that into all of the work that you do. And so looking forward to seeing that here at Sky Meadow. But all right, well, let's stop gushing all over each other and loving each other so
Yeah,
much,
end
and
this
save
before it
that.
gets too sappy.
Yeah. But this was great. Thank you both so much, and I can't wait to see you in a few weeks. So till then.
Beautiful.
Thank you.